and thank you for attending my presentation today. The title of my work is Rethinking Engagement, How Managers Frame and Make Sense of Communication Strategies, Practices, and Challenges. This was also my master's thesis that I successfully defended last October. When looking at the existing studies in the engagement literature, I discovered that managers tend to like the terminology of engagement, and it might sound compelling for them. However, the meaning and interpretation remain unclear for many. Also, there are several unclear overlaps between terminologies that are being used in the workplace. For instance, engagement and satisfaction have been used interchangeably, as well as engagement and commitment. While these terminologies sound similar, there are significant differences to each of them. This was also shown when looking at job and organizational engagement, since job engagement focuses on the job task itself, while organizational engagement focuses on the employee as an organizational member. Existing studies also take a rather quantitative approach, leaving out lived experiences and individual perspectives. The qualitative research that exists has shown that managers seem to face many challenges when trying to implement engagement strategies. In addition, there are only a few studies that take a more critical approach regarding engagement. So for instance, I looked at Wong et al. 2019 study that looked at rather negative outcomes of engagement, for instance, work-life balance, knowledge hiding, burnout, or undermining the effects of negative thinking. So based on the existing literature, framing and sense making have been used as the conceptual framework for the study. I described this a little more in my thesis, but just very briefly, framing relies on leaders' thoughts, and it depends on the language they choose to achieve communication goals. And sense making, on the other hand, provides clear questions and answers that lead to decision making. Therefore, both concepts have been used to gain insight into managers' thoughts and perspectives and how they experience the concept of engagement in their work environment. This also helped develop research questions which consider the existing literature, the research problem, and the framework. And the first research question that I developed is, which frames are brought forth by managers when addressing communication strategies, practices, and challenges? And the second research question is, how do managers make sense of the notion of engagement? So before we start looking at the findings of this study, we will look at what methodology I've used. I chose to conduct a qualitative study by interviewing 10 managers in the province of Ontario. The interviews were semi-structured and managers were able to share their experiences. I also used a thematic analysis approach with an inductive coding process, which allowed me to find commonalities and differences among the given answers. So just a little bit more about that. After each interview, I transcribed the data, and for the majority of the recordings, I used an online website to help expedite the process. I started to the coding process after, and I reread the transcripts several times for code. So this inductive coding approach based on Boyatzis allowed me to develop themes from the raw data, which then allowed me to find emerging patterns from the interview. I was ultimately able to develop 4 emerging themes. So 1, the framing of employee engagement, 2, manager engagement, 3, employee engagement, and 4, the organization's engagement. And all 4 consist of interesting responses that managers have provided, but just based on time constraints today, I will just focus on 2 of them. So looking at how managers framed engagement, it was interesting to see that there does not seem to be one overall framing approach managers agree on, which is consistent with the existing literature, and it was also not a surprise to me. Throughout the interviews, we saw that some managers frequently made use of the term engagement, as they believe it's necessary for an employee to do more than what their job requires. However, in the daily work environment of managers, it seems that this term is not often used as preferred language, and instead they prefer to use other words such as success, care, or involvement, so words that they believe they could more easily define in the day-to-day practices. So, for instance, Mary, one of the managers, said, work engagement, it's not a term we use often here. I guess someone who's engaged is interested in the success of the business. So this shows that she's not absolutely certain because she used the word I guess, and she also admitted that it's not a term that they use often, which can then cause further issues. On the other hand, Tara made the notion of care her most prominent language attribute throughout the entire interview process. She said, care at every level, definitely. Yeah, it's a really good word. Our motto is humans, humans, humans. There's something about you coming in. You get some sort of satisfaction. So we can see that care has to be visible at every level in the organization in order for employees to be engaged. She mentions that she prefers this language instead of employee engagement because it has a direct connection to humans to the point of becoming a motto about humans, humans, humans. The second theme that I developed is about manager engagement, and the data shows that managers use a variety of strategies to show their own engagement, such as care, humor, professional development, and social events. Again, words and actions that they seem to be more easily visible and definable for managers. Also, many managers that are interviewed acknowledge the importance of fully showing their engagement. However, they did not seem to be able to express and share how this was done specifically. So, for instance, when asked about how she shows her own engagement and whether her expectations were made clearly, Lana, one of the managers, just said, I lead by example, and I think this is a good way of showing that she expects employees to be engaged based on her own definition of engagement. However, she also admitted that she never clearly communicates what that leading by example specifically means. On the other hand, Lucas, another manager, said, okay, well, I don't take myself too seriously. That's one of the things I do. It's important. I ask for open feedback. So we can see that he's using some sort of humor to express his own engagement, and he personally believes that he's not too serious, which can make us wonder whether employees would agree with this statement. He also stated that he asks for open feedback, which is an important engagement strategy in his opinion. So throughout my thesis, it stood out that the managers that I interviewed had significant difficulties of finding one way of framing engagement which is consistent with the existing literature. Some used words such as I guess, while others took a while to respond to this question. Some managers also admitted that even though they didn't use the word engagement, having an engaged workforce was crucial for them. This contradicts itself, but it's also consistent with the existing literature, and it shows that there's a difference between what managers want and how they frame it. It rather seems that engagement is a very broad terminology for many of them, and it seems easier to express it by using words such as care, involvement, or success. Another difficulty was measurability, because it remains questionable based on the various framing approaches how you're supposed to measure engagement results using a survey if it means something different to each manager. This also connects well to making sense of the notion of engagement, because most managers indicated that they felt that if it was their role to foster engagement and not the role of the CEO or other employees. However, it became clear that managers experienced a rather frustrating sense-making experience since they felt very limited by the things that they could do. Overall, it seems that engagement is a significant and important issue for most managers, and the study has shown that managers seem to be using a variety of sense-making approaches. So to conclude this presentation today, there are 3 takeaways from my thesis. First, framing and communicating engagement seems to be a complex challenge for managers, which has been consistent with the existing literature. 2, many managers frame it in their own way, which broadens the meaning of engagement. So managers seem to find several other words of making sense of engagement by using words that are more easily definable in their own opinion. And 3, opening up the meaning of engagement is helpful for the organization, meaning there seems to be a wide and broad spectrum of the terminology of engagement that exists for managers that are interviewed. Thank you very much for your attention today, and here are my references.